Here we are with Ross Nicholls. Now, for everyone listening, this is actually the second time we've done a podcast. The first one, which was really interesting and really in depth and got, quite deep, didn't record because Zoom is unreliable. So now we're recording on two different systems. Ta-da! So let's do a nice stage. So, how are we doing, Ross?
Yeah, not bad. Not bad at all.
All good fun, all good fun. Now, instead of going down the same route we went down last time, I thought I'd go down a different sort of path, and more your coaching mindset. So a few things I wanted to really sort of go into was more like, I don't know, there's a few things. So we start with coaching like brand new guys to up to the elite of the elite. So when it comes to obviously the complexity of the games you play and the sort of systems you put in place, how do you find, I don't know, getting beginners to a certain standard again? Like, do you want them to just have an open-ended game and then give them a certain structure? Or is it a case of you give them a structure and see where they take it as such?
It's a really interesting question because you never know which move your students are going to really take to right off the bat. I guess it can be anything. You get some lads come in and they're instantly take the passing aspect. Others have pretty natural guard retention abilities. Others more submission focused. You see a guy come in who's like 6'3" and weighs 65 kilos. You're going to be a triangle guy. So what I try and do is, so you got to get the core movements down initially. So yeah, shrimps, and it all depends on the level of what sort of ability they have to move their own body to start with as well.
I mean, this whole question is going to be based around the answer, it depends. So this is more sort of grassroots fundamental upwards. So again, it's more a case of where do you take this blank canvas and where do you start to build someone up is my sort of real question with this.
I tend to start with my half guard in normally. I feel like it's the kind of one of the easier guards to teach, one of the easier guards to retain, which is massive for a beginner. You want them to be able to hold that guard so they feel comfortable and actually throwing a bit of offense out from it. That's why you see these kind of closed guard, tighter guards, guards where you can potentially cross your legs to control a part of your opponent. They're more applicable for lower grades. You couldn't really use a butterfly guard because it's open, and a lot of the control and guard retention of it is very advanced mechanics. So I start with my half. Always discuss the framing aspect of it and the correct sort of body shape. And then I really want to get them understanding chains of techniques early on. So I use it to try and explain how we throw something out there to get a reaction that we can predict and then move into that. So I want them to get that concept early on, and so they can apply that to all aspects of their grappling. I guess then after a while, they'll discover a move or a position that they love and they naturally take to. Then we can start layering on top of that. So it's a little bit of a path of discovery, and as an instructor, you have to just sit back and watch sometimes to see what they really take to.
Now, with that in itself then, when it comes to teaching and building these people up from scratch without any sort of core understanding, do you like to do more technique by technique, or would you like to do a general concept and sort of fill the techniques in to fill the pieces in? How do you like to, I don't know, build that understanding as well, as not just the techniques themselves?
Well, I always go with 3 moves connected with each other in a standard class. I think you really don't want to be jumping between, you do this from side control, you do this from mount, you do this from this other position. The only time I do that is if I really want my my students to get like an armbar down. So I'll have them armbarring from as many positions as I can think of. And at the end of that class, they'll be able to do an armbar. So I think teaching chains, and I'm quite big on defense as well, being active while defending yourself. You see it all too often, like white belts or even higher grades. The moment things start to go wrong, they freeze up and stop actively thinking about grappling. And it's just like turtle defend. Those are the times when you really need to be proactive there to escape. Somebody's about to get your back. Worst thing you can do is just do nothing there.
Now, the way you described that is really interesting, that sort of active defense, and that kind of being proactive at those sort of times. Because again, when it comes to these attacks, they've put you on the back foot, so you're like one step behind. And obviously the natural reaction is to sort of shell up and sort of say, oh, please let go, don't hurt me. But like, you have to try and fight that instinct to try and, catch that step back up. And when it comes to your own, I don't know, training and reactions, how have you, I want to say trained out of it, because I feel that's a natural habit for a lot of people to try and, shell up and also like, not proactively defend opposed to just sort of try and recover as such.
Well, the way I always kind of look at it is that you don't have a fucking choice. So like some of these starting to dominate you, you're in a dominant position, you're in a shitty position. Then you've got to do shit to prevent that from getting any worse. You don't have, whereas sometimes with offense, we're kind of catch ourselves like, well, should I go for it? Maybe not. With the defense stuff, you're doing that. No choice in the matter. So that's how I kind of, and in many ways, I feel like that's why that comes. I mean, white belts, they get used to being in shit positions. Is what they practice the most, right? At the start.
Not by choice, but yeah, they have to kind of have to.
But yeah, I think that, so you're stuck there, but you don't have a choice other than to try stuff, because, if you don't, you're getting tapped.
I think a lot of that is the consequences. I feel like damned if you do, damned if you don't. So you might as well do it at that point. So it's just this kind of like problem solving as well.
Whereas if you're like thinking about going for, we all do it. It's like using a takedown, for example. Should I shoot? Or maybe I should have shot that and it's gone. With defending your back or defending the mount, defending any crap position, you don't have that there. It's just, do or die, right?
Now, again, with that kind of urgency and that sort of mindset, it's really interesting hearing that kind of, that perspective on it all. Because again, you very much hear the more, well, this is another point where it comes to being technical, but also athletic, and also being explosive at the right times. And also like, because in an ideal jiu-jitsu world, you'd be very technical and very inch by inch, and it'll work very nice and controlled. But do it against someone who's, on the same kind of level of you technically and similar weight, kind of comes down to a bit, I need to sort of, properly explode. I need to probably bump, dig my elbows in a little bit, try and get an angle. And it's like, where do you kind of draw that line of, I want to say almost like thesis is shit. Like, at what point is athleticism not jiu-jitsu?
Excellent point. You got to use all your attributes, but you don't want to rely on any one. Athleticism is far more useful if you learn to read your opponent and use it at the correct times. Being athletic for athleticism's sake is not helpful. That athleticism is used far better if you're able to read the situation. So when you get all of them coming together, that's it. Your timing, the quality of the technique, and the athleticism. That's when you get a good grappler. And
again, that's kind of the point, because you get people. I had this conversation with Daniel Strauss. It was interesting, his sort of point on, like, when it comes to strength, like, the sort of thing of someone's bigger and stronger than you, like, it doesn't count because they're stronger, but it counts. They got you.
No, it's like, it's the same as flexibility. I always feel like it's a little bit of a backhanded kind of slight. It's like, oh, you're really flexible. It's like, no, I've just got good guard retention, like,
You're really strong.
You're really strong. Yeah, I train to be like that. In the case of Strauss, right? These are all attributes that we should be willing to use. but we shouldn't rely on anyone. Strauss doesn't rely on his strength. Like, he's a good grappler. He can read his opponent. He's got really good timing with his techniques. He's got quality techniques. The strength enhances all that.
And again, this is always a bit of a, I don't know, a conflict of certain conversations when it comes to this area of jiu-jitsu.
It is. A lot of people really kind of put a lot on, you know, the strength aspect of it, or, you know, the drilling side of it. It's a mix of everything. I tend to lean more towards, I want to be on the mat as long as possible. None of us have got an unlimited amount of grappling time in us. A lot of that is, you know, and our best grappling years are like 15 to 40, I guess, before we start falling apart, right? Let's get as much in as we can in the time that we have to do it. So that's my kind of attitude towards it. I don't want to get to, you know, 60, 70 thinking I could have done a little bit more. No. I should have made better use out of my body when I was young.
Now, when you say better use, what does that mean in the sense of, do you feel you're not doing the recovery and the maintenance to get you that bit further? Do you feel you've a bit more strength, a bit more explosion would get you that bit further? Is it something you feel you're missing out intentionally? Is it something you feel you're prioritizing over it? What does that mean?
I can't remember who said it, but I think it was like a Greek philosopher. It was like, I'm gonna really kind of, I don't know, weird now, but he's like, a man should always experience, you know, I guess anyone should experience their body like in peak physical condition, you know, and like to make it as hard and as strong as possible. Know what that's like. I love that about training. Every session I want to just make myself that little bit tougher, a little bit harder to beat. And you only you can kind of get into that in how people and how we view masculinity these days, I guess. I was talking about this with my girlfriend earlier, how like the gun culture in the US is kind of linked to masculinity, and how, you know, understanding guns makes you more of a man. I kind of think that's like one of the amount of power you get from having a gun. I guess you link masculinity with power, but it's kind of disproportional to the amount of work you have to do to get it, right? Whereas in jiu-jitsu, you have to really earn your strength, you know? You have to earn that toughness.
Now, that's a really interesting sort of parallel to sort of draw as well, because again, the sort of, I don't know, the patriarchy sort of society where you're led by men in power, and to then draw that parallel of achieving power makes you feel more masculine. And then again, this sort of what comes easy seems to give out sort of fulfillment, but still be taken away so easily. So again, these sort of guns, and you get this literally like dick measuring, essentially, that same kind of pissing contest mentality of, you know, mine's bigger than yours and this, that, and the other. But then it's a bit more substantial, a bit more, I don't know. Again, I keep ripping off Jordan Peterson, but it's what's meaningful, not what's expedient. Again, it's not the sort of the short-term gain, it's long-term gain of what you've earned in jiu-jitsu to have that same kind of parallel in a sense. And then it's that whole underlying confidence. Like, what does masculinity mean to you? Because again, you've identified that as a trait that some people have recognized of power being part of it. What are the key sort of traits of masculinity that you sort of identify, I don't know, with or as? You see what I mean?
Okay, I think so. And as well, we want to kind of, so masculinity, I think, is kind of an outdated term in a lot of ways as well. I know I just use it because we should be looking at everyone just being a strong person and wanting to, you know, achieve strength. I think control over one's emotions is massive. I think one of the most, I guess, if you're losing your temper, shouting, screaming, or just not controlling your emotions in however way that might be. I think that's a sign of, you know, of being not being masculine at all. And you see that's like a lot of men behave like that, you know, screaming and shouting. My next door neighbor where I'm living currently screams and shouts all the time. I don't know how they but the ability to step back from any situation and think about it analytically and logically, and not allow your emotions to get the best of you. That's important. Standing up for injustice when we see it, even when that injustice is caused by people that maybe like us. I think that's important. I think defensiveness isn't a masculine trait. I think like being critical of yourself and always trying to improve. But again, all these, you know, masculine traits are things I think should be put under strong. And then ultimately, strong people should try to help everyone to become strong. Like, we can't be strong all the time, but people who have strength, their jobs are trying to make things better for people that don't.
Where it gets interesting, this style of conversation, is where you draw these lines, especially with the current social climate of everyone's racist, everyone's sexist, everyone's saying this, that, and the other. And then when you have to draw the physical differences between the male and female in the biological sense, chemical sense, all these different elements. And then the terminology all gets very sensitive at that point. And this whole
this whole
debate over
is massive. I think that's where a lot of arguments start. I think is when people are altering terminology or interpreting things in their way to suit their own agendas.
The confirmation
bias. I think in any conversation and any debate, you first have to get, you know, the what things mean to start with. You'd be talking about two totally different fucking things. You know?
Sorry, it's a bit
Sorry,
delay.
I interrupted you.
No, it's a bit of delay, so it's all good. We'll just give a bit of space between the answers, and I'll cut the space out afterwards. When it comes to this whole thing of equality versus equity, and this is where it gets very confusing, and that when you say to people everyone is equal, that is the biggest load of bollocks I've ever heard in my life. That everyone is so concerned with thinking, oh, no, I don't want to be racist or sexist. No, we aren't equal. No one is equal. That's the beauty of people. They're very individual. If, like, you tell me the old lady down the road and me are equal, I am taller, she has had more experience, there aren't two attributes the same. How is that equal? And that's why equity is important.
I mean, we're all born equal. I mean, the starting point is all the same, right? Well, but it isn't. That's the problem, right? Is, you know, things are made harder depending on the color of your skin, depending on your gender. They just are, and you know, we have to accept that in order to hopefully try to solve those problems and like listen to people who are aggrieved.
Is my delay coming through? I can hear people talking. I don't know if that's my delay or if that's people downstairs shouting. But when it comes to again, this whole debate is where it gets really tricky. And again, trying to make sure you understand the same thing. And the concept I've used a few times, and I'll use it again for this, is like, how would you describe a house? What would you, Ross Nicholls, describe what a house is if I ask you that question?
Bricks and mortar and the people that live in it.
Exactly. So that is one way of describing a house. I could say it's property, it's somewhere to live, it's shelter. So we both describe the same thing in different wording. Now, the risk for getting that wrong is very minimal. And we both now roughly know what we're talking about. Whereas more sensitive issues, with that area of being misinterpreted, the risk for that is much higher because, again, the reaction is a lot more sensitive, it's a lot closer to home, even though the point might be the same. And this is where it gets so tricky to have these conversations with certain people who aren't prepared to take that into account. They may have misinterpreted what's been presented to them. And that's how it could be very dangerous.
Yeah, no, so it's that willingness to learn as well. We should always be open-minded and willing to learn. I was I watched a little bit of a Dave Chappelle video before this. It wasn't his stand-up.
That's like quoting it.
No, he was so he was asked to talk about police brutality and, come up with a joke about it. He does this, like he asked the audience what to speak about. So he spoke about it, and a lady in the audience shouted, "Life's tough, just get on with it." And he proceeded to go down and educate everyone within that room. The lady then wanted to speak to him afterwards, and she came in. She apologized and said she was ignorant before, and now she's educated, and it won't happen again. And what Chappelle said was, like, so he's really kind to her. That's all you can really ask, is for people to listen and try to understand. And just from that, she has become, I guess, going from part of the problem to part of the solution. That's how he described it. I really like that. I grew up in, South Wales, in a pub in South Wales. And one of the things that taught me is that even like people with some, rather odd views on certain aspects of life, whether that's race, how people, see themselves with LGBTQ issues. Like, people are a spectrum of ideas and things. And they can have really great aspects about them and some really rather negative aspects about them. But it all comes down to education and the willingness to learn and listen. And we've got to stay malleable there. We've got to, and change is difficult. It's like, growing up, certain things that I would have said before are no longer, I don't think they're acceptable now. But what a lot of people do is, to protect themselves, nobody likes being wrong, they have to make the world around them change so that they are right.
Now, that's a really interesting way of describing that. And this is where that vulnerability really comes into effect, of being prepared to be wrong and being prepared to accept new information. Because for anyone to say, if they've ever learned something new, to then say that is the extent of all the things you need to know that is new, that's just ignorant. Like, surely if you've learned something new, that proves whatever you've learned wasn't the absolute. And then on top of that, it's then being able to, combination of apply, but also ask questions. Because I can't help but feel, when it comes to these sort of hostile environments, that if you say the wrong thing, you would then be scorned for it, you'd be branded as a racist or this, that, and the other. But I feel if you don't make mistakes, you can't then learn. If for example, my nan is from a different generation, she says a term that used to be appropriate when it isn't now. If no one says to her, that's not what is appropriate anymore, you need to say this instead, if she doesn't say anything at all, she's never learned that. Whereas it may not have been said from a place of malice. I mean, I'm not going to go around sort of saying test it and just sort of, call people X, Y, and Z, but a case of be prepared. If you're not in an environment where people can make mistakes, they can't learn. And it takes back to jiu-jitsu quite nicely of, if you'd ever learn, if you'd ever try anything, you can't learn. If you can't make mistakes, you can't be corrected. Now, when it comes to...
And humans want to have those two boxes, bad or good. People are malleable things. They can change. They internalize information and change on based on that. It's down to everyone to educate themselves on their own opinions. And I mean, Akala is one of the best examples of it. That guy, he has a debate, never raises his voice, very concise, And you never feel like he's actually attacking the person he's trying to educate. He's trying to educate them. He's not having an argument. He's not having a debate. And you can see that with, he's been on some panels. And the way, you can never force a new idea on somebody. The moment you start raising your voice and trying to force that idea on somebody, it won't take. You just have to present information and hope, and hope that information takes and makes a change in the person for the better.
And I guess that's a really hard aspect of this whole conversation, is where this ignorance comes from, is also this willingness to prevent this information to come in. The people who think they know it and don't want to learn. It's like if someone comes in to try and teach you something you don't agree with or don't want to be taught, the whole information, you have your own confirmation bias that I'm going to find a way to make this wrong, find holes, find this, that, and the other. But if you don't find them, you'll make them, then you'll just put yourself in this box. And on that sort of subject of, I want to go back to the jiu-jitsu, when it comes to your students and their questions, do you ever feel, how do you deal with that situation? So when it comes to people having areas they need to improve on, do you wait for them to ask the questions? Do you proactively give them the advice? Do you ask them questions to instigate a certain thought? Because again, you'll see a lot of times, seminars especially, and it says, anyone got any questions? And
No,
very rarely.
yeah, nobody pipes that. Everyone's worried about being wrong or asking a silly question, right? That's, you can look at it in what we were just talking about, or even in a really kind of chilled environment like that. I mean, who really gives a fuck if you ask a silly question about an armbar? So in terms of like with my students, I try to be as approachable as possible. If I see something that needs to be tinkered with, I'll bring it up, I'll address it. And then sometimes you just kind of got to let, sit back and make their own mistakes. I mean, that's how ultimately we all learn. Our parents give us advice when we're young, but there's no better teacher than, life itself. And it's the same with grappling. There's no better teacher than actually getting out there and doing it. My job is to make it as safe as possible for them to do that initially. And then to help them along the way, just to speed it up.
I mean, that's an interesting way you describe that, as not even being the prime mover in that, more of a catalyst, more of an assistant to the process than it is the actual main enforcer of it. Because even though you are in that coaching role, it's interesting the fact you haven't even made it, I don't know. Again, you get this kind of leadership kind of mentality of being the coach and then having the students and then trying to make it all one, bridging that gap. But the fact you've almost done it from almost an outside perspective of, even though I'm part of the process, it's almost completely on them and I'm just there to observe and speed the whole process up as such. It's interesting the way you've worded it.
It's not my story, is it? It's theirs. That's the way I kind of look at it.
No,
and the last thing I would want to do is, I don't know, overshadow my students and their achievements. Be like, this is me. I did this. I helped you. Nah.
Well, it's an interesting sort of conversation with that. So, for example, belt rankings are a fine kind of example of this. Whenever someone is a black belt under someone like of high profile, let's say Roger Gracie black belt, I don't know anyone like that. Wink, wink. And and then that seems to be the first accolade of being a Roger Gracie black belt, or being a Henzo Gracie or a John Danaher and this, that, and the other. And I can't help but feel, as much as that is an achievement in itself, I feel that sort of redirects the attention as such. It then gets spread a bit too much. Like, whereas if you sort of say ADCC winner or something, you'd say, okay, that's their accolade. Whereas if you say who your coach is, it almost then says, oh, I'm not surprised, because now it gets redirected to the coach, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I guess what we strive to be is an individual in our own sport, isn't it? The moment you move out from being a Roger Gracie black belt to, I don't know, like fucking Ross Nicholls, this and that, That's
Isn't
what we
that?
strive for, isn't
Oh,
it?
he's so modest. I love it. Ross Nicholls can grappler extraordinaire. Welsh man of mystery. If you're too modest to give yourself a title, I'll give you many. Don't you worry about that.
Yeah, so it's no, it's an interesting. So I'm kind of, I really enjoy helping my students, and there's no better feeling than, you know, knowing that you've been a positive influence on somebody's life, right? That's what we're trying to do.
And this is where the fact you said about being a catalyst, or not word for word being a catalyst, but the same sort of thing, being a catalyst and being part of the movement of the process, and not so much of an instigator as such.
Well, I don't want to be a crutch, do I? Either.
Well, exactly.
I guess. So we can bring that back to the strength aspect of it, you know?
Yeah, look at this, is all coming together.
Yeah. So, you know, strength is, you don't want to be a crutch for people. You want them to be able to go out and do it by themselves.
And this is also the interesting concept of being a black belt or so-and-so under whichever coach, is that it almost doesn't really make a lot of sense to make it an accolade, in the sense that, say you and the however many other black belts under Roger Gracie, how many of them are the same? Because if you are a champion of a certain division of a certain thing, that is a unified standard of you have achieved this specific thing doing a specific method of you've beat this amount of people. Whereas if you've achieved a belt ranking from an individual, you've had your own relationship with them, and at your own specific rate, you've achieved certain things, and then they've decided you're achieving that rank. So it doesn't almost make sense to have a tangible, you've filled out these, I don't know, requirements to get this medal, versus you've gone on an individual journey with someone on a very, although it's tangible, I feel the whole system is, how do you explain it? I want to say not structured, but in a more tasteful sense. Not structured seems a bit spurious, but in a sense of open-ended. I want to say, is that a better way of phrasing it? I don't really know. Am I digging a hole? Something like
No, I think I follow you.
that. I
Yeah,
hope so.
and neither way is less valuable than the other. You know, we're all different.
Now, on that same sort of subject, when it comes to accolades in themselves, briefly we spoke about, I say briefly, on our last conversation we went quite a lot of depth on it. When it comes to your accolades and your sort of status as such, how much value do you give it to your next performance? So say you've got a certain title, say, I don't know, ADCC gold medalist. Your next match there, are you carrying the weight from that previous performance, or is each performance like a clean slate?
I'd want it to be a clean slate, right? Because I think the worst sort of pressure that anyone can experience is that pressure of people around you expecting you to win. You know, to be a surprise when you lose, that's horrible. Yeah, ideally, I would like to just say that, you know, it doesn't matter who I'm grappling against, but it does creep into your mind sometimes, and you have to press the reset button, you know, and just then focus back on the technique and your game, and really, you know, that's your kind of space away from everything else. We all have our escapes, right? Some of us have more than others. So grappling is that escape for me. So if you really kind of get into it, and the moment you're on the mat and you actually start going, it kind of sucks you in, and all those kind of worries and feelings you have about your opponent kind of melt away.
Now,
the hardest bit is that stepping onto the mat and then going. That's the hardest bit.
what's funny the way you said that now, because the other day I had Jay Butler on, and he was telling a story about how he competed against you at I think the South End Open or something like that. And despite having the matches in your bracket afterwards, you asked the other guy for a match, and like quite actively, like practically saying, "Okay, let's get more matches in. I'm thinking, as much as you've described it there as, you know, it's quite a big mental taxing thing, you're proactively getting more of it. I mean, it seems
But
a bit like a
you know
punishment
what?
on
I
you.
only have to do it once a day, though. That's the weird thing. So, like, that's why I prefer tournaments. Once you've done it once, it's cool. So then I want to get as many matches in as possible.
I mean, that's so true in the sense of like the apprehension on the day, all that kind of stuff. I mean, I'm saying from like a white to blue belt and like, you know, the odd amateur MMA fight of like the equivalent, not the same as, you know, Polaris and the rest of it, of, you know, the whole build up, you get your like food prep, whatever, you've got some meal deal or whatever, you get there, you're nervous, you're hanging about all day thinking, shit, who's my guy? You're sizing everyone up. You're like, okay, Facebook stalked him, or there he is, he looks fucking massive, even though he's
Yeah.
not. You're like, shit, okay. Well, he feels really strong. You're like, oh, wait, I'm all right now. Back to
Yeah,
whatever.
then it's like, it's gone. Every time we test ourselves, we're always challenging our self-image, aren't we? You know, how we see ourselves.
There's something I read the other day I thought was really poignant, and I think you might appreciate this as well. I'm going to crudely word this just because I'm not that eloquent with certain things. But when you're in the unknown, you never know how you'd act or how you'd feel until you've been in that situation. And when you're in that specific pressure, you then know how to deal with it. So, prime example of that, you've had grappling matches, you've grappled in the gym, you fight on certain shows. If a new show arises, you'll have a different kind of nerve. You'll be against someone different you've not had a match before. So, although it is very similar to what you've experienced and it's very familiar to what you've really been around, because it's a new experience, it will then push you that bit further. And it's just that kind of thing of embracing the fear of the unknown and what you don't know, and then see how you actually deal with that as such. So I think that's, I don't know, I think it's quite poignant to sort of appreciate that being in the literal unknown is where you can then build and then grow. Because, you know, when it comes
Yeah.
to
And
training
there's
and
no
stuff,
better feeling than after that, is there?
oh yeah, 100%. Because you get that kind of
That
self-righteous bit of
little bit of fear and crossing that threshold and coming out the other side of it, you know? And ultimately, we want as many tests like that as possible in our life.
And I think this is a huge part when it comes to these kind of careers where there's no definitive finish line. And career is a bit of an illustrious word, a bit vocational, but in the sense of I'm going to go on a whim and say you didn't take up jiu-jitsu to make money. I'm going to say that wasn't your initial like priority. Because if it was,
No, I wanted to make money, like, you know.
like a normal person. No, but this
I
is
don't think
it.
it's a bad thing. I want to make money out of something that you're good at.
No, but like initially when you started in the first place as a white belt at day one.
Yeah, I mean, the way I kind of thought of it was, you get good at anything, you can make money out of it, right? And what you're most likely to get good at is something that you love.
I mean, my point is,
I was
before you
lucky
started
that,
jiu-jitsu, is day one, like, do you know what? I see my new career as a case of, you know, you do it for fun, you get stuck in. Not so much now when you're competing and doing really well.
weird. So when I started jiu-jitsu, I was in college, like hoping to get into medical school. So I did. I went to UCL to do medicine. I did a year and a half of that and switched my degree to biomedical science because I couldn't train 5 days a week whilst doing a medical degree. It's funny how they change, right?
I thought, carry on with that then. So you're doing biomedical. So what was the difference in your training at that point then and your actual training for the course itself? Because you just left it on a bit of a cliffhanger. I'm really interested now. So what happened then?
Well, I was spending too much time in the gym and not enough time in the library studying. But I graduated in biomedical science. I got 2-1. So I did enough work to get a decent degree. And then afterwards, I remember telling my parents that I wanted to just do, not go for a job in that field for a year, take a bit of a gap year just to train. And I did. I was working in a conference center, setting up rooms. So like just moving tables all day and then going training at night. And I remember doing that for a year. And that was at brown belt. I had a really good run at brown belt. And then kind of right place, right time. I'm in central London. Our club is started doing very well, needed more instructors. And Caesar thought, placed trust in me to teach at his club, and I did. And here I am now. So, yeah, still got my degree. I don't know where it is. Somewhere floating about. I should probably get it framed.
I mean, you got enough artwork in the wall, should be all right. I mean, Does that make you Dr. Nicholls, or is that a separate thing in itself?
No. I'm only an undergrad. I'm not definitely not a doctor. I don't really like title. Like, so I feel the whole professor thing with jiu-jitsu, it's fine. Be called whatever you want. The way I look at it is professor has a kind of, it's weighted heavier in English than what it is in Brazilian Portuguese. I said professor over there is teacher, right? So as professor here is like, you've done a fucking lot of work to be able to call yourself that, And granted, we have done a lot of work, but to get there.
Do you think this
Coach
goes
is
down
fine
to
for me. Coach or Ross?
Or chief or boss man or whatever. When it comes to, we had this conversation again when it comes to about your, I don't know, image of self, of almost a bit of imposter syndrome when it comes to these titles and accolades. Do you feel the same with that title of professor then, in the same kind of way of, as much as you achieve what you do and have put the work in? I mean, again, like the way you had to correct yourself, but to be a professor, you have to put a lot of work in. I mean, I do put a lot of work in, but you almost had to remind yourself at that point. Like, oh yeah, I have been training consistently for ages.
It doesn't feel like I've put a lot of work in, go out there. Just enjoy it. I guess it might be even like a bit of a protection mechanism for me, not to put too much pressure on myself and not to expect too much from myself.
I mean, this is really important as well, because it's the reality. And this is why I appreciate your honesty with this kind of thing as well, because it's not easy for people to talk about this kind of stuff. And especially when it comes to a combat sport. I mean, yes, there's no striking, but you're still ripping people's knees out. So I think that's pretty combative. It's not very nice, is it? And again, this whole nature of, I don't know, there's a bit of a parallel, a bit of a contradiction when it comes to this concept of martial arts, when it comes to vulnerability and putting on a brave face, and also, grit it out and be fine. But when it comes to certain elements of, mainly the mental side, I feel, of, oh no, I'm struggling with this, that, and the other, or I can't get my head around that, and what ifs and this and that and the other, and then the whole thing of, oh no, don't worry, you'll be fine, and just sort of not addressing it as such and trying to deal with that.
Struggling to go off of that one.
Yeah, I don't really know where I was going with that. I was hoping you'd fill the gap, so I thought I'd waffle through it. But yeah, it's an interesting sort of concept in like regards of, do you get many students vocalizing their concerns about certain areas, or is it mainly sort of technique to technique, or is it a lot of an open conversation?
Absolutely. Your students come to you all the time and, oh, I'm struggling with this, or I'm not getting better. I just, we've all experienced that, and it's hard. There's a lot of shit things about this job as well. About this life choice, I guess. You want your students to get everything they want. It's like your kids, isn't it? You want them to have everything whenever they want it. You don't like seeing them get hurt. That's the worst thing. Seeing an injury with somebody that you teach. I almost feel like you kind of let them down a little bit. I really feel that. Not winning tournaments, not getting what they want. But, it's that hardship in many ways that creates, the best sort of people, right? There's a thing going around at the moment that, like, bad times make strong people make good times make weak people make bad times. So kind of cyclic like that. But we'll seek out a little bit of that hardship to make sure that we, and it's not massive hardship, is it? It's not the same as, wanting for, not sure if you're going to get food in the night and what have you, and the way some people live in the world. But you know, being in a round that isn't going too well and digging yourself out of it.
I mean, the way you've sort of described that as well, I mean, as much as it comes down to, yes, people have it worse, it's not really about them in the minute. And it's about what we're talking about now. And when it comes to your students competing and them coming up short, how do you find not taking it too personally? Because it sounds like with that emotional investment and also wanting the best for them, you can't help but, you know, be a little bit heartbroken, a little bit gutted when they get caught with this, that, and the other, or get their like default bronzes and this, that, and whatever else.
Yeah, you get used to it. The same with anything else, you know, and you commit more to them and try to help them as much as you can. But you know,
When it
it's
comes
not
to
an
that,
exact science because, you know, people are so different.
when it comes to cornering at competitions, are you a bit of like a helicopter parent, or do you sort of let them crack on and work out their own routines and experiences?
I change time to time. Depends on the student and the level. You know, it's now somebody like Jed, for instance, he really don't need any help. Like he knows his pathways, he knows where he's going. Maybe sometimes you need to tell him to pace himself a little bit because like he's on it from the start, but like he's sequentially understanding the technique, he's got it all down. Whereas you got, you know, a lower grade, a white belt, and they probably need a little bit more technical help. But it's important you don't try and teach them how to do a move during the match, right? So it's a big concepts there, and it's important that people speak the same language as you as well. You can't really just corner somebody that you don't really know very well and haven't taught before in a tournament. You gotta have a little bit of a background there so you understand the same words. Because everyone's got their own way of describing jiu-jitsu. Every instructor.
And now, with that being said, how have you found your sort of language of jiu-jitsu and your coaching style? Has this been primarily from Roger? Is this something Caesar's given you? Something you've just developed over time? Where have you found this style as such?
I always used to be a decent teacher even in school. So like I remember in college we had our maths tutors were kind of a bit patchy. So we were swapping between them a lot. And I ended up I think we had a history teacher come in at one point. They had not really haven't taught maths very much. I essentially taught the class. So we used to do a lot of tutoring and stuff like that in school for like extra credit getting into universities. So I've always been reasonable at explaining things to people. So I'm not sure my teaching style has really come from anyone that's taught me. I'm sure I picked little bits up from people. I've always been a decent teacher going through school. And we're always, you know, trying to improve that as well. Sometimes I think about how I used to teach certain things 5 or 6 years ago, and you're like, shit, how bad was I then? You know, super harsh, but always looking to improve.
I mean, this is where it gets really, I don't know, intricate and awkward to an extent when it comes to teaching groups, especially in jiu-jitsu where you get different levels, different, again, so say if you have Jed in the same class as day one white belts, you try and explain saying I'm Mar from close guard. I mean, let's pretend in the situation Jed doesn't know what that is with his wealth of knowledge anyway, and is then trying to have the same language throughout everyone, and then making sure they're all getting their degree of progression. And then I don't know, how do you deal with that sort of mixed levels and classes to try and make sure everyone's getting something out of the session?
I think so. One of the best things that higher level grapplers can do in a situation like that is teach the other guys. So that's kind of a more of a standoffish approach from my part. So I can walk around and help the people that really need it. If I've got a situation where I've got 10 white belts I don't know, 5 purple belts, something like that. Those 5 purple belts will be teaching those 10 white belts that armbar. And that reinforces their understanding of it. Like the biggest improvements I've had in my grappling and understanding of my game has been through teaching. So why shouldn't I expect that to work for my own students?
Now, with that being said, then you see quite a lot of parallel between people who can do and those who can teach. Not that those who can't do teach. I don't like that as expression, doesn't make sense. But this kind of idea that just because someone is at a certain practical level, their level of, I don't know, communication and being able to express that can then translate. Do you try and encourage people to be able to teach, or is it something you hope they pick up along the way? How did you feel with that kind of instance?
If they're able to learn how to do an armbar, they can learn how to teach it as well. And it produces another level of understanding deeper than just being able to do it. So I don't fully subscribe to, or some people are just really good grapplers and can't really teach very well. You can learn to teach. Like I wasn't a great teacher at the start. What makes me a better teacher is having taught probably for an accumulative of close to like 5,000 hours over how many years, you know?
What's that thing? Is it 10,000 hours to be a master?
10,000 hours, yeah. I'm getting there.
Almost. And then on top of that, it is interesting when people rabbit hole themselves. Rabbit hole, no, pigeonhole, that's the one. When it comes to how they define their skill sets. So you get people, like we said then, like I just did, was consciously saying that some people can't teach. But that's not to say they can't be taught. However, you get these sort of people who you define as, I am this kind of person, or I am that kind of person. And how do you find having your own style and saying, I've built up this technique, this game. We'll pretend you're a one-dimensional butterfly leg locker man and not, everything else. That, one-dimensional butterfly leg locker Ross, this is your box you put yourself in. How do you find diversifying your game and your competitive game? Because again, when push comes to shove, you'll do your A1 stuff, you do the things that you know has success, versus how do you find being able to take, I don't know, the stress off of it, not necessarily the foot off the gas, but like the pressure off of it to try and, okay, this is my
practice things that you're looking to develop. It's tricky, right? I mean, I've done it already. We've all done it, I guess, at some point. So up until purple belt, I couldn't pass people guards. And now I'm quite happy with my passing. Butterfly didn't come into my game until brown belt. I'm starting to wrestle a little bit more because my friends are saying you gotta wrestle. I've got to be pulled into things. We're all stubborn in a lot of ways. Doing it in tournament, then it's just finding an opportunity to do it once, and then that confidence will hit, and it'll pull itself into your game. But the more you grapple, the more you put yourself into these situations in tournament, the more likely you'll have those penny drop moments, and something new will get added to it.
I think that's the important side of it as well, being vulnerable and being able to be taught again and being able to grow again. Because I can't help but feel when you get to, like, again, I'm going to say status of a black belt, that when you get to that point of, I should be competent in all areas, I should be at a certain level of certain areas.
I do think like that, yeah.
To then be vulnerable again and appreciating, okay, this belt is it Henzo or is it hoist that only covers 2 inches of your ass, you got to cover the rest of it, something like that.
Yeah. I don't really feel it anymore. Like, I mean, you do kind of focus on it a lot, but initially when you're chasing that belt, and it feels good when you get it, but it kind of fades away into just something into your being, and then you want something more to add to that, don't you?
And then it becomes I don't know what came first at that point. And that some people seem to, as soon as they get the black belt, their personality shifts and then they become, okay, I have to be this, like you're saying about being the professor kind of role of, I am now this rank, this person in the class, I have this power over, not power, but like this kind of patriarchal figure that if I am the leader, if you were to compromise me, it then compromises the whole structure of the class. So that now me being vulnerable, it then doesn't give my, I don't know, the amount of power to what I'm saying, the amount of value. And that kind, I don't know, it sort of builds that whole ethos of we are in charge, you don't question what we do with this, that, and the other. But then you sort of remember, you know what? How did you get there in the first place? You asked questions, you tried new things, and you know, got beaten up trying it, and you worked it out. It's that sort of parallel such. I mean, I can't speak from experience, but believe it or not,
Yeah,
being
and
two-strike blue belt, I can't, you know.
you gotta catch yourself every time. I mean, you know, it is kind of, you know, there is an element of power to it, and power in a lot of ways can, you know, it can corrupt in however small way we have it, right? So it's important that we find ways of keeping ourselves grounded, and I have that with my students. Like they I have good banter with my students. You know, that don't make fun of me, and I wouldn't have it any other way. You know, call me out on my shit.
I mean, that's what you need, because I've had a couple of chats with like some sort of like world champions, this, that, and the other, and you always hear that when they get home, they get absolutely roasted, and that's what you want. You want people sort of, you know, yeah, you're still you. You need that. You need people like taking the piss out of you. You need to be, you know, not knocked down a peg, but like, you know, reminded where you came from and who you actually are.
Yeah, and like as well, I kind of like, I mean, what the fuck have I achieved in comparison to Roger Gracie, right? What the fuck have I achieved in comparison to not even just people in our sport, into, you know, fucking be anyone, pick anyone. I don't know, Alexander Fleming, like coming up with antibiotics and saving probably the most lives out of anyone in history. You know, it's like we all kind of get caught up when we, you know, in our own legend a little bit, right? And I think it's, you know, people have achieved a lot more than me. You can never be done. Not allowed to be done.
Now, with that in itself, of all people, Russell Brand was quite insightful on this, because he was on Joe Rogan ages ago, and he was saying about like his achievements versus someone else's. Then in saying the grand scheme of things, you've got asteroids, you've got planets, you've got all this kind of thing going on. What relevance does what I do have on anything? And
yeah, I have that.
I kind of like, you know what? I may have got this, you know, £5 or a couple 50p value medal from this competition. I paid 60 quid to enter, but you know, there's another moon was made from an asteroid or this, that, and the other. I don't know physics very well. I'm just going to go on a loop and say this, believe it or not. I'm not Neil deGrasse Tyson. Sorry to break any personally bubbles there, but again, it's this kind of perspective. I think that's the important thing, and not blowing your own trumpet, but also giving yourself a pat on the back at the right time. And that it's always on a knife edge, really. Like, how do you find giving yourself praise when you need it, when you deserve it?
Yeah, and you got to be careful then to give yourself praise all the bloody time, and then I kind of err towards the other side of never giving myself praise.
Nice, healthy way of living.
I know, right?
Now, when it comes to that sort of system of reward system of, you know, I'm doing something, and if I'm doing something, it's because I like doing it. And if you're not getting the pat on the back from yourself, where do you find that from? Where do you get your confirmation from, I want to say? Is it from the results themselves? Is it from being sent invitations to things? What is your sort of checklist for, okay, I'm still Ross Nicholls, the competitor, not, you know, Ross Nicholls, the biomedical graduate and table mover?
Yeah. God, I don't know. I think you do have that little bit of self-congratulations, that little bit of happiness, that, but then that fades. Nothing ever lasts. You know, if you make £1 million when you're 20, and then you get a 70 and you haven't made another pound, are you still satisfied? Yeah, are you still satisfied? I guess it depends on the person. I know I don't know if I would, even that really big achievement. of accumulating £1 million when you're 20, is that enough then to stay satisfied until you're 80?
I mean, the word there, fulfillment and sort of satisfaction, is kind of really it. And there's that real progress which gives you that feeling. So when it comes to, again, there's a thing of what is it? When people say where they see themselves in like 5 years, they always say like, oh, on a beach, sunning yourself, this, that, and the other. But that's not an ideal. That's a holiday poster. That's not, you know.
Yeah, mate, like that is a nightmare. In that, like, oh, I've completed it. No. Like, it's all right to do that a little bit now and then, but I think we've always got to be kind of chasing something. I think there's a weird statistic where the moment you retire, like your life expectancy drops massively.
Because again, this is where the whole thing comes from. Like, I can't help but feel that even when it gets to your level as well, these different scale of competitions, your progress and your performance opposed to the result still has that much more value than the actual result itself. And that sort of progression in that sense, because of the beauty of what jiu-jitsu is and the amount of different elements to improve in, because you've got that sort of improvement. Like my nice, naive, mature example for this is Call of Duty. When you start ranking up nice and early, the progress is so quick, it's so gratifying of, yeah, I've got this, it's sick. But
and then you're grinding to get that next one.
Exactly.
Yeah,
but it's the progress.
I'm all in on character development. Fucking love that in video games.
Look, good old RPG is what you need.
Yeah.
Build up the attributes.
Just one more level. Just one more level.
No, but the worst thing is if you got like a grid or whatever it is of your development, you got to make it all even, make sure it's all in certain areas, make sure everything's at a certain level, you get your overalls. And again, if you want to sort of make it all statistic based, it works quite nicely. And again, it's not in the... Go on.
You want to make that like OP character, don't you? That OP character build.
And exactly that. You don't want the finished product. That's not the point. It's the grind of getting there.
It's the process of getting there. Yeah, so it happened to me like, so I did like a Fallout 4 playthrough.
I was going to say
all the time in the mall, right?
Even that was
all the time in the world. So I'm like, I'm going to make a stealth build, you know, and just a stealth melee build. So I did like a wasteland ninja. I created a wasteland ninja. Epic. Bored now. Literally one shot in everything's point.
But then what did you do? Did you start from scratch again with something else? Or did you sack off and get a new game? I
might need a new game to do another build.
But that's the point. It's that kind of progression. It's like, this is why you still test yourself. Because when you go through each belt rank, you start, getting higher levels of competition. You start, taking the scale up, and you're then, adjusting the difficulty. You're not playing on beginner anymore. You're now on like legendary or like world class, whatever it is. I'm a veteran.
Yeah. Like winning isn't enough, is it?
Well, winning isn't the point.
It's how you win. Yeah.
It's not the point not to be happy, it's to be meaningful. It's to be like, the happiness of the win isn't really the point. It's the substance and the progress of getting there. Like, this is why wins are so like empty, whereas the process is so fulfilling, because it's meant to be. You getting your hand raised and attributing value to that is your decision. You feeling better in what you're doing is chemical. That's a natural problem solving element. Because, not being funny, if you put your hand up now and then also did it when you came to a competition, nothing's really changed there. But because you've attributed other factors to it,
somebody else doing it for you.
Exactly. I mean, that's the beauty of it. I mean, the amount of people who picked your hand up, you must have thought, you know what, here we are. Nice and easy. Don't know the hard, but I've done it for you. But again, it's this sort of attributing value. This is where I feel people get it misconstrued in some sense. If they put all the value on the end product, that when they get to that peak of the mountain, it's very underwhelming. It's like, oh, I've now got another plastic belt that sits on my shelf, or I've got a trophy I'm never going to use. That was worth it. But it's the process of, getting there. It's the rounds, it's getting beaten up. It's the progress and stuff, which really gives you that substance.
Yeah. I had not an argument, but so my mom today was like,
Debate.
well, I was gonna. So I've got a bunch. I've left all my medals are back home and all my trophies and stuff, and I've just bought my own place. So I'll be moving. And she's like, "Do you want all these?" And I'm like, "No." Clutter the place. What do I want them for?
It's like like the wind chimes. It's like that. Someone opens the door, you hear the clang of ADCC medals just sitting around. And
yeah. But it's not a bad thing either. To like, we're all different, right? So it's not a bad thing if you're listening to this, guys, and sitting at home and you got your medals up on the wall, and that's what motivates you. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just I can't. For me, it's not the way I have to hide mine away.
And that's the point for everyone listening as well. Everything that gets discussed in these podcasts are very much my and my guests' individual experiences and how we then develop from certain things.
Yeah,
Very individual.
This isn't the right way of doing things. You got to find the right way for yourself in doing things. And maybe my way will resonate with you, but if you're listening to this and you're thinking this is full of shit and it's absolutely not my way of doing things, that's fine too.
Exactly. The biggest point we made throughout this whole thing is there isn't definitive good or bad or right or wrong. A lot of it is down to your interpretation of how you make things right. Like if you win via a triangle or a guillotine or whatever else, the method you do it is your application. The end result is what you're aiming for. And that's kind of the point. It's why it's an art and why it's not a fixed kind of thing. That's why there is a structure, but there isn't the same rules. And that's why I know there is rules, but the wording is very important. That you've got something to aim around. You can't do that. You can't do this, but do everything else. And that's kind of the point. I guess it is a rule, but in a sense, you've got a structure built for you. And this is why some people don't dwell on the mental side of it. Some people get really overwhelmed by it. Some people care more about the physical aspect. And this is why I'm kind of, I don't know, my podcast, my rules, things I care about, I ask about. Something like that.
Yeah, but if there's one of you that's interested in that, there's probably going to be more.
Oh, 100%. I mean,
so hopefully a few people will find what we've covered, what I've said, interesting. And I like that we've gone into other aspects or reached out from jiu-jitsu into other aspects of life and like that. I enjoy talking about that.
And I really enjoyed this as well. Where can people find you on social media, my friend?
Ross Nicholls, BJJ, really unimaginative.
How'd you think of that one?
Insta handle on Instagram, that is.
Cool.
And find me on there.